kind of amazing.
Hello and welcome back to the program. I'm your host as always, the Matterhead himself, Jacob Hayes. Thank you for joining me. Folks, I don't know how to tell you this, and nobody else will, so here I am, being the voice of reason. They're lying to you, folks. Everybody's fucking lying to you. Alright, I don't care who you are, they're lying to you, alright? We're talking about the news, we're talking about the schools, we're talking about your social media companies, your tech giants, your Fuckerbergs and your Bezos bitches. You know what I mean? Those motherfuckers. It's the billionaires. It's the tech geek dork, Revenge of the Nerd type dudes all brewing together. You know what it is? It's soullessness. It's psychopathy. It's narcissism. It's playing God. That's what you get when you play God. And yeah, you might reap some short-term rewards for sure, but as every religious and moral and folk tale that we have in any culture has taught us, anything that's of substance, anything that's a real authentic story, which they don't tell those anymore. They don't make those books anymore. They don't produce those films anymore, because that would require a thing called soul. Which is being sucked dry from the world as I speak. They don't want you to be creative. They don't want you to be. They don't want you to tap into your divine spark. They don't want you creating things. They don't want you inventing things. They don't want you solving problems. No. That would be too good. We don't want problems solved. We want problems to continue. We want chaos, because, as we all know, if everything's chaos, then you can make order out of the chaos. And these plans that we're conspiring to do can be fulfilled. I'm sorry, I'm a little rusty with my Joker impression, I'll admit, and I'm a little tired and a little hungover, so, you're not going to get the best quality. But, that's why you should subscribe to my Patreon, Strange TV. I'm going to be starting a Patreon for the program as well, because then you can help up the production value. I can get more sleep. I can get food delivered to my house, which is always nice. And then I can eat that food, and I can continue to get fatter as I sit and on my couch watching Netflix. And no, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that to you guys. But if you do support me, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Production value is going to go up, okay? The comedy's going to get better, because I will get more, well-rested. And, sorry, daddy needs his beauty sleep. It's just what it is, okay? And then on top of that, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you guys an extra episode every week, at least 30 minutes. Extra episode content, all right? And who knows? The show might get longer, might get shorter, but there's going to be more content either way, okay? I'm at least going to get you guys 30 minutes, all right? I do a once-a-week show, the program, this show, the one you're watching right now. I'm going to publish those on midnight on Fridays, or maybe midnight on Saturdays, but for now it's going to be midnight on Fridays, all right? And if you want the additional 30-minute one, that'll be published midnight on Saturdays, right? Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to do it. So, if you like what I do, if you like what I talk about, if you enjoy some comedy and some entertainment, as well as talking and joking about the news a bit. I mean, I'm not really a news guy. I'm not a political guy. I'm an entertainer at heart. But, I've learned a few things. I've seen a few things that would blow and knock your socks off, blow your mind, and rearrange your insides, okay? So, because those things have happened to me, and because I've researched quite a bit, and because, I like to think I'm a fairly okayishly well-read person, there's a few topics I wanted to bring with me in my voyage of entertainment. I don't want to just entertain. I want to do like what the old stories did. I want to entertain, and then if I can, bring some truth to light, some wisdom, some out-of-the-box, maybe we'll have some speakers on, some guest interviews, who knows? Maybe it'll just get more and more comedic and less serious, I don't know. But I like the mix, I like intellectual, high IQ entertainment, and I think you guys do too. I think you're craving it. I think you need it, and I need it too. And frankly, I got too much going on upstairs to not do this show. So whether anybody watches this or nobody watches it, I appreciate the few people that do, because, like I said, I'm doing this more for me, myself, and I. It's a way to vent. It's a way to deal and de-stress and make comedic light of the world. Because frankly, it's The ship's going under. I mean, the Titanic's sinking, folks. Rome is burning and falling, and all the fucking, you know what I mean? Like they're pulling the rug out from beneath us. And fuck the political system. I mean, I don't like any of the parties, by the way. You're not going to see me rooting for a candidate anytime soon. Okay, this show isn't about any of that shit. It's about mocking the king and pointing out how ridiculous the system is. It's about ideally going down the rabbit hole a little bit and looking into things, asking questions, not being afraid to ask questions. We have the right to ask questions. We have the right to look into things, ask questions, and frankly, I know journalism's dead in this country. All the real journalists are being killed by the CIA. So as long as that's the case, I mean, freaking Ghislaine Maxwell only got 20 years. Like, you think this is a just system we're living in? I mean, this is a tyrannical regime that's taken control of the government. It's ridiculous. But that's why we need entertainers, comedians, philosophers, authors, artists, storytellers of all kinds. To also, to me, it's not about, joining an ideology or, if I, protest enough, whatever will change. I think the system's wiser than that. It's smarter than us. It plays us against ourselves. It polarizes everybody. It gets split on the wrong issues. You know what I mean? Like, it gets us worked up over, rather than unifying against our common enemy, which is the elites of the world. And I don't just mean anything, everybody who's wealthy, by the way. I'm not like that. But there are people who don't use their wealth in positive ways. Or worse, they think they're doing positive things. They're sold on a certain utopia, a certain idealism, and then they do really awful things. I think a lot of evil gets done in the name of good things, okay? So it's a crazy world. We're going to try to tap into it, talk about it. Today, though, I wanted to get into a little bit about the UFO phenomenon. What is it about? What's really going on? Here's the thing, and I'll always say this with all my shows. I am an entertainer. I think it's fair to call myself a researcher. I've been involved with a lot of personal, amateurish, I'll admit, research that I've done in my own mind, as well as one can do when it's kind of you versus the world, meaning like I'm doing this myself, I'm doing this outside of work, I've been doing this outside of even school, because this goes back to high school and college for me as far as where a lot of this research began, because I didn't grow up being a sci-fi guy, I didn't grow up being a UFO guy. Sure, the stories were, every once in a while you'd hear something, you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but I didn't think too much of it. I grew up in a fairly, religious home, and I think it makes sense that you view the phenomenon not solely through a religious or spiritual lens, but don't be afraid to consider to do that, because I've learned so much by studying, comparative religion, comparative mythology on my own, and just reading what different cultures believed, studying a little bit of shamanism. A lot of shamanism, actually, a lot of, kind of anthropology and the culture and the kind of the psyche and spirituality and mentality and philosophy of different cultures as much as I can, especially of the ancient world. It always fascinates me. I think you could spend several 100,000 lifetimes studying these things, and you'd still, there's so much in them. And it's not something, these aren't subjects I don't think everybody sees the inherent value in, but I've been drawn to it my whole life. I've always been very into symbols and, metaphor. To me, that's everything is art in that sense, meaning everything is a metaphor, everything is a poetic communication, and secrets themselves are that as well. I always compare the world to hieroglyphs, especially in relation to the quote-unquote conspiracies of the world, right? In other words, we're surrounded by all this information, so much information nowadays that we can barely take it all in, and because it's all in different languages, quite literally in some cases, you're in a world of hieroglyphs. And so, it's kind of like the man in the cave, Plato's allegory of the man in the cave. Like, if you're not familiar with this allegory, basically there's three guys chained, I think it's three, they're chained in this cave, right? And they have a fire behind them, and then a road where people, merchants travel and things like this. And their whole lives, these men have been chained there. They've been fed and, given enough water to stay alive there. But they don't know anything about the outside world. One day, they liberate one of the guys who's been chained up. So basically, up to this point, they've only seen shadows, right? Because there's the road, there's the fire, and then there's them chained against the wall. They only see the shadows of the world. So one of these guys finally gets liberated, taken outside the cave. He's shown daylight. He's shown nature and trees and everything, and civilization, I think, as well. And then he comes back, and he's so excited. He tries to tell his friends and explain it to them, and they don't believe him. And why would they? Because they have no understanding or conceptuality or any way to relate to what he's saying. So of course it's going to sound crazy. Now, all this to say, I don't think every time somebody has a crazy, outlandish, fantastical story, it's automatically true, but it's in human nature to negate nature because it's not part of the nature that's your local experience. Even though nature, meaning objective nature or objective truth, could include things that you could never consider or believe in because you don't have any way to process it. And so I think there's constantly, especially in all forms of nature, things that are occurring that are outside of our visual spectrum, for example, or outside of our spiritual or perceptual awareness on some level, that at the very least you can't negate. You can't say, well, it doesn't exist. Like, how do you know it doesn't exist? And in fact, I would point to so much history, so much religion, so much mythology, so much folklore, so much, not even just the spiritual stuff, but a lot of like human stories where you're like, man, this permeates everything and everywhere. I mean, every culture has like an alien-like interaction. And before I go too much into that kind of subject, I'm not a big aliens guy. I think whatever the phenomenon we're dealing with are spiritual or ethereal entities. If I were to guess anyway, it is a guess, obviously. I don't have any kind of scientific proof for that, but with my own experiences with it, there is a relationship with consciousness and how it affects your psyche. It's playing with our psyches, and if it's anything like what the spiritual and religious accounts kind of describe it as, or even the folklore and mythological accounts, like the Celtic fairy faith, for example, and the Norse gods and all this kind of stuff, it does point to something that is of a spiritual nature. Maybe it's even purely of a psychological nature, but it seems to be of a spiritual nature, and it seems to be able to manipulate through glamour, whatever the heck glamour seems to be, which pops up in the fairy folklore and things like that, where it's like this ability to, and it's also in the Bible when it's describing the majestic serpent in the Bible, it says that he uses glamour as well, or it uses glamour as well. And glamour in the ancient world in this context is this ability to either affect their etheric field or visual field the way it seems like they look, or they can actually shapeshift, or they're just projecting what they want you to see. And that there's some kind of hijacking of the visual cortex, which plugs into vampire myths as well and all kinds of things where you have like these others. What they are. I mean, the others, which is what I call them, is what I've been writing about and researching my whole life, even before I realized that it connected to the quote-unquote alien UFO phenomenon, because I started to realize like, oh, because basically it began for me where I was very into all these myths and legends, right? And I always thought, well, there has to be something connecting these things because these kinds of things repeat across culture. And then when I was introduced to the UFO alien phenomenon, I was like, this seems interesting because there's a lot of similarities to Middle Age accounts that I've read about, especially with like, what's it called? There's like this whole succubus, incubus, demon concept that it like sits on your chest, causes, I forget what it's called. I'm sure you'll write it in the comments. But it's there's another way to refer to it, and it's basically the phenomenon of, it's sleep paralysis. There we go. The phenomenon of sleep paralysis. Now, I'm not saying that all sleep paralysis is a spiritual demonic encounter or something like that. I don't think that's the case. But I will say I've only had sleep paralysis once in my life. It happened after I was reading the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I wasn't creeped out about it. I was purely for my own personal interests. I fell asleep reading it. I was really tired. I didn't even think anything of it. I woke up in the middle of the night, fully awake, fully lucid, fully conscious, could not move anything. I think I was breathing, but I felt frozen. I felt like something was freezing me, basically. And I feel like I heard things like 2 or 3 small creature things. This is just what it felt like, by the way. I don't know. I can't prove what it was. We're rifling around the books. I had a bunch of books stacked up in my room at the time, and we're knocking things over and going through. That's what it felt like. It was like they were going through everything I was writing. I had papers and everything. I'm not the most organized person, so, things were just scattered about. And it was at least a minute or two of that, and I was still processing, trying to figure out even what this phenomenon, what I was experiencing. I was like, because I definitely didn't feel at all like I was dreaming or asleep or tired or anything. It creeped me out because I couldn't move. I was like, man, this must be a physical thing. Before I know it, out of nowhere, I felt like I was released. And you know what caused it? I literally thought to myself, and I'm not a preachy guy, okay, but this is what happened. I'm just telling you guys the truth, okay? I thought immediately, Jesus Christ. I just thought it. And the moment I thought it, it was as if I said it with like the clarity of the thought that it like pulsated out. I could move. These things were gone, and it felt like that whatever this phenomenon was, this force left the room. Now, hey, Will. So that's an example. It's an anecdote, obviously, but it's an example of one of my many personal experiences with spiritual and paranormal phenomenon that really seemed to be that. It didn't seem to just be that. Because once again, first time, I was in my 20s when this happened. It's the first and only time before or since that I've ever had that sleep paralysis experience, right? So sure, you could say, oh, it's just psychological or it's a physical phenomenon from the sleep or whatever. But once again, it's the only time I've ever had it. What are the odds, right? And the Egyptian Book of the Dead, by the way, is a very spiritually dark book. Even if you don't believe in that kind of stuff, objectively, it's a dark thing to read. The Egyptian religion is very dark. It's not about worshiping anything divine or good. It's just not. It's you know, and people think, oh, you know, what, paganism? It's like, you have to understand, okay? The whole war between monotheism and paganism is God a singular thing, or is God this universal, outside of time kind of thing in a way that permeates everything and that's, you know, beyond everything? Because in the ancient world, a god was often a hero or a man of great strength, or maybe he had great social ability to manipulate people. I mean, even to this day, for example, in Africa, a sorcerer is defined by someone who can render forth his dreams or his wants, his vision on the world into the world. You know what I mean? That's a sorcerer. And so using that kind of definition, you could have positive or negative sorcerers, and we definitely have. And then I think there's also things that, you know, whether these things are actually what they are, if they're actually angels and demons and things like this, or if it's just mankind, archetypically it's the same thing. And so that's why I go, even though, yes, I do believe in the spiritual reality of it, I always extend that olive branch where it's like, you know, same with the conspiracy stuff. It's like, you don't have to believe that there's cults running around doing things per se, but at least recognize human nature and the, you know, allure of greed and power and dominating everything. And you know, I'm sorry, but psychopaths do rise to the top of hierarchies very often. You know, to say otherwise is just ignoring the data and the reality of it, you know? So once again, even if you don't want to buy into the spiritual stuff or believe it, I get it, man. Like, I've experienced things that I really have come to appreciate. Like, until you've experienced certain things or met certain people that you really trust and have heard their stories, yeah, you're not going to think any of this kind of stuff is possible. And even if you do hear it, it's a hard thing to process. And there's so many different messages in this kind of subject of the UFO alien territory, and most people are very sci-fi about it. I'm sorry, they are. They want us to think, oh, they're from other planets and all this stuff, rather than recognizing that this phenomenon, maybe it does originate elsewhere in the universe, but for the most part, Earth is some kind of multiverse highway, you know? I think there is something special about Earth, and it seems like these things have been with us since the beginning. So I tend to lean, because of all these accounts in the ancient world and Middle Ages and throughout time. I mean, even in America, the 17, 18, 1900s, there's tons of accounts of early settlers and whatnot talking about UFO phenomenon. Maybe they didn't put it in that kind of verbiage, but, you know, they definitely pointed out, hey, there's weird lights in the sky, spiritual manifestations, all kinds of weird stuff, you know? So once again, I think a lot of these things are explained in the human condition. Experience of worrying about what is God and who is the proper God comes from what a lot of Judeo-Christian beliefs teach, and it's also something that you see in other religions and cultures and mythologies as well, that essentially there are things that are, you know, basically there's fallen things in heaven itself, as the Bible teaches, and that there's fallen things in creation and in hell. It's, you know what I mean? So that there's in other words, that there's a multitude of beings, angelic or otherwise, and I don't put a cap on creation either. Like, to me, I'm not against the alien concept. I just think that the alien concept presents it as something more, once again, science fiction oriented in its vision of it, rather than, I think, the true reality, which is these things originate somehow in the spirit world in some way. Maybe not all of them, but this is just what I've come to believe so far, and I could be wrong, you know? So once again, do your own research, do your own homework. This is an entertainment show after all, but this is just, you know, sharing some of my personal experiences and what my hunches are with this phenomenon, because I've had a lot of spiritual experiences regarding the phenomenon, and I do think it does want to confuse you and manipulate and mislead you. I don't think we should try to go to war with these things. I don't think we should listen to what the news or mainstream media has to say about these things, because, frankly, I think they want you to either fear them, want to go to war with them, or want you to worship them, think that they're these super enlightened beings, and it's the key to, you know, all this. I mean, even if you're not religious, it's inherently culty, I think, to look at the alien and New Age movements and go, oh, there's nothing weird there. Like, it's obviously very culty what's going on. And yeah, so I think it's weird, and I think it's weird to try to deify these things. Whatever the phenomenon is, it is real, but it's not something that you should worship. It's not something you should fear. You know, whatever it is, it's once again trying to mislead us. And I'll also caveat with, I think there's probably positive things as well, meaning I do think there's genuine angelic, if you will, or the equivalent of whatever angelic things are in the universe. I think there's positive forces. I think God's a really real force. So I don't just talk about and believe in dark things and dark experiences. I've had very positive experiences as well. And once again, I don't like to be preachy. I'm just being honest with my life experience and what I've seen. And, you know, to me, you know, I'm not the only one in my family even to have experienced, you know, seeing lights in the sky and seeing strange phenomenon like that. It's not a super common thing in my family, but I'm not the only one. And beyond that, not just my family, but people that I've come to know through some of my research, I realized, man, this is a really common phenomenon, and it does seem to be spiritual. And once again, could be wrong. I think there's also the opposite, or the inverse, meaning like nuts and bolts craft, or things that could be man-made, or are reconstructing whatever the original technology came from. I don't want to really claim what that is. Maybe it's aliens. Maybe it's, you know, like the John Dee kind of philosophy. John Dee was this Middle Ages guy. He was like a court mystic for the queen or something like that. I think he claimed to be Christian, but he basically got into this channeling kind of stuff. It was basically with like an old school Ouija board and like crystals and all that kind of stuff. And he met beings that near the end he decided were probably demonic because they were denying Christ was the Lord and all this kind of stuff. And anyways, it's interesting because he translated from this medium experience these Enochian alphabet, which is supposed to be this whole foundation for dark magic. Now, I don't do dark magic. I don't do any magic, so I don't know how real that is, but this is part of history in the sense that people believe that this occurred to some extent, and, you know, how real the magic is or whatever is not really for me to say. But I've seen enough things in good and I think I've seen enough things of God and of darkness to know that anything's on the table, you know. And that's my whole point with my show is, once again, you don't have to agree with everything I say. I don't always agree with everything I say. I change my mind constantly. I'm always evolving on this subject, especially because it's such a fluid subject. I don't think any of us should be tied down to like, oh, well, you believed this last week. It's like, yeah, I'm doing my best as much as anybody, and I'm just one dude, and I don't have financial resources or some whole team or business or whatever to like really spend time on totally mapping this stuff out. But I've spent enough time in it to, once again, verify that, hey, just in the military accounts, enough sober individuals that were trusted by the American government to be hired into the military, to be trained, and to, you know, we trust them with weapons, we trust them with carrying out these elite missions. And you know, in some cases you have 10 to 30 personnel, military personnel, who witnessed UFOs, especially with the whole Nukes and UFOs, which is a great book to check out, talking about how near the true origin of like the advent of nuclear weapons, that then the UFO phenomenon really started to speed up, and these UFO phenomenon would happen at military bases. This was the first set of research that really got me into going like, okay, you can't just say, oh, well, some crazy farmer or some hillbillies who saw a UFO this time. It's like, no, we have tons and tons of military cases that aren't too easy to find, I'll admit, but it is out there. And if you get the right books and the right research, you can find out more about it. I highly recommend, I think it's called the Black Vault Project. That guy's research is awesome, and from what I've seen anyway, he seems like a solid dude, so check out his stuff for more insight onto this phenomenon. And he covers a lot and has some really great interviews, so I can't recommend him enough. Black Vault Project, definitely check him out. I think he's on YouTube and a couple other channels as well. And he has a website, blackvoltproject.com. Never met him, you know, not affiliated, but, you know, from what I've seen, he seems like an honest researcher in the subject, you know. Another one who's kind of up and coming, he's adding a lot of interesting insight, is Nathaniel J. Gillis, who brings a more biblical-based research approach to the UFO phenomenon and what I was talking about with sleep paralysis phenomenon and the alien abduction phenomenon, where Anyways, I'll go to his channel and check out his stuff. But he's definitely support him and subscribe to him because he's a very well-read guy, I think, on this subject, and is bringing a lot of things that some things I already thought about and looked into and researched and believed, and then things that I didn't consider before. So I think he's another interesting voice to check out. There's many others too, but as far as recently, those are some channels that I would definitely recommend checking out. And once again, not all UFO phenomenon sightings or recordings are actually that, meaning like something that we don't know what it is. Like, sure, sometimes people record drones, sometimes they record an airplane, or they think it's like Venus or whatever, the moon. But I've seen enough things and thought I saw things in a couple of circumstances where I was like, oh, okay, that's the difference. And to me, if you catch something on film that moves strangely enough, meaning like it's not just over the horizon like in a straight line, and it's moving. I mean, I've seen a lot of different stuff to know, like, okay, that's what the phenomenon looks like versus like, oh, I think I saw it and then I misunderstood. Because that is, I think, something that probably happens to a lot of people after you've had one genuine UFO experience. Is it's hard to, you do start going like, whoa, is that what that was? I'm not saying you start seeing it everywhere, but you start looking for it more because obviously you're like, well, this is intriguing. Let me get to, can I see this again? And for me, I've had 7 to 10 sightings at least, probably more, but at least that I can remember where I try to record it at least, and didn't always get convincing enough footage. That is the other issue with this, is like, unless you like iPhones are great cameras, I agree, but it's hard to like record something that you see, if it's not super close, it's not going to get something like to distinguish between a star and a planet and a UFO, or something that could be a UFO or a drone or whatever the heck the thing is very difficult, actually. A lot of people are like, oh, come on, really, you can be 4K, you know what I mean? Like, no, because, the experience doesn't usually last too long, at least in my experience. You know what I mean? The things are gone pretty quickly, and they're already pretty far away. So as far as trying to record it in time to like before, it's not easy. So anyway, it's an interesting subject, and it's, I don't want to say it's all related per se, but it does seem to have some kind of shared origin. You look at cases like Skinwalker Ranch, for example. They have UFO phenomenons. They've had, wolf poltergeists creatures appear. Native American, wisdom keeper apparitions, all kinds of weird stuff. And that's when another interesting thing is if you've ever looked at any of the maps that are out there that show like a geographical map of the United States, and where you have UFO phenomenon sightings, like the clusters of them, like the density clusters of them, where you have UFO sightings, where you have Bigfoot sightings even, and a whole range of paranormal and ghosts and demonic sightings and reports happen in the same kind of areas. And they seem to be often in places like Native American burial grounds. Not always that kind of a thing, but it's often got some kind of like interesting kind of lore, kind of an area that it's a place with a lot of history, a lot of spiritual energy, if you will, be it positive or negative, seems to have. It's kind of like with Celtic fairy tradition of talking about the thin places, and beyond the veil and all that. There's places where the worlds intersect of our world and the other world, whatever that is. Some people say, oh, that's only demonic. I tend to believe that whatever the spirit world is includes things that are probably positive and demonic. But yeah, I don't think you should probably get into the practice of reaching out to those things, because that tends to not end well. Like in the case of John D. Even he at the end started to feel really bad and worry, because he's like, I'm pretty sure what I've been talking to isn't angels, but in fact demons. Once again, it's not all demons. It's not all angels. It's probably a mix. And there probably are, once again, positive experiences, because I myself have had positive spiritual experiences. But I can't stress enough the importance of spiritual discernment and trying to do your best to really be level-headed and not get carried away with, if you do have a sighting or an experience, to not just believe whatever popular talking heads out there, including myself, right? It's about looking into things yourself, praying about it, doing your own research, looking for evidence, trying to be, once again, level-headed about figuring out the phenomenon. I think it's okay to believe in the phenomenon. I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that, but defining the phenomenon is an entirely different matter, and so we have to consider that and not get too caught up in believing in what we think we see, right? We want to make sure that whatever we're experiencing is, as best we can, try to define it, get to the bottom of it, and understand it. Try to comprehend it if we can. It's not an easy thing to do, and, I've thought before, like, oh, should I devote my life to just studying this subject? But the truth is there's not a lot of, and it's not my only motivation, but if we're being honest about it, it's like, look, massive ridicule massive, there's no upside from a social angle that I see anyway. There's, not a lot of money in it. I'm not certainly sharing any of it to make money off of it, right? But there is a reality of like, well, you can't really make a career out of it conveniently. And frankly, I'm more of an experiencer and amateur researcher, so I don't feel like I'm that dude. I also have a background as an actor and a comedian and entertainer, so, I feel a little bit weird talking about it sometimes, but then I'm also, I look at like Dan Aykroyd, awesome actor, awesome comedian. He talks about his paranormal experiences, his insight on the UFO research, and it gave me a lot of like, okay, well, if he can do it, if he can do both, then I'll wear both hats as well. Because I don't claim to be an expert or a guru or anything. And once again, I always encourage, do your own research. Try to get to the bottom of it yourself. And hopefully, if anything, take what you can learn from this show and other shows and not non-shows as well. I'm a big believer to not just, hey, don't go just watch crap on YouTube. Like, and I'm not against stuff on YouTube either, but like, be smart about how you learn and how you grow mentally. Don't just, once again, buy into or believe what you think you see or what you think you know. But I do believe this world's very magical, very mystical, and very interesting. And yeah, it's something that people don't talk about enough because we're in the age of atheism and nihilism, and we're in an age where to believe or to profess that you've had spiritual experiences, people look at you crazy. But I really don't give a shit about that at this point in my life because I want to be honest. I want to share my experiences. Let's say I die, they dissect my brain, and they're like, oh, cool, it was a tumor causing him to say all that crazy shit. Then fine. But this is my genuine, honest opinions on stuff. And, once again, I'm trying to get to the bottom of it, trying to figure things out. It's not the only subject I'm into. I also love history, studying religion, what I kind of dub supernatural history, which covers a lot of this paranormal and religious phenomenon. To me, it's all very fascinating and interesting to study and talk about. And, just in the archaeological finds that have happened in my life as well, there's so many cool insights that we're now getting into trying to understand what the ancient world was and is. And, how, especially in my opinion, the New Age elements are resurrecting elements of the ancient world. And that's where I go, be careful, because don't be wrong, I love to study Egypt. I love to study a lot of these things that are considered pagan or whatever, but worshiping things that they did or getting too into their kind of spiritual philosophy to me is weird and dangerous and doesn't lead to good or positive things. But I do think there's a lot to be learned from these cultures. So I try to clarify that, because, you see it with Egyptologists all the time. They get a little too into their own sauce kind of a thing. That's another fun subject, talking about the age of the Sphinx and, the water erosion and what's going on there. So lots of fun topics to talk about with this show. But we also do a little bit of comedy. I like to joke around about stuff. I'll talk about movies. I'll talk about, books I like. It's not always research oriented. Sometimes, it's just stuff that entertains me. I find to be quality. Let's see. In fact, let's talk a little bit about movies and TV for a second. As far as solid television projects, man, I'm pretty picky when it comes to that stuff. Vikings, though, what a fucking good show. I binged that shit like crazy. My dad got me into it. It's such a fucking good show, man. And pardon my French, but it is really solid filmmaking. The Floki character, he's the shipbuilder in that. I mean, what a guy. Definitely check out the Vikings. It's good shit, and it seems to be pretty historically accurate, which is another pet peeve of mine. Britannia is another good show I got into. That shit's pretty awesome. Definitely recommend that. It's about the Roman invasion of Britain, and it's got all the British druids in it. Pretty entertaining stuff, and very enlightening from a spiritual perspective as well, because they do portray a lot of paganism in a pretty authentic way from what I understand of it, and it's pretty interesting stuff. So I think, if you're religious or not, if you just like to study this kind of stuff, supernatural stuff, different cultures and their beliefs, and different spiritual experiences and perspectives, it's very enlightening and entertaining and very interesting. So definitely recommend that as well. Let's see what else is good. Sneaky Pete, excellent show. Amazon Prime, you'll notice, is a lot of my recommendations. I don't like Bezos, don't like Amazon, but damn it, if Prime Video is not the new HBO, I don't know what is. But yeah, so anyways, that's some movies and TV I definitely would recommend as well. So yeah, we'll talk about all kinds of fun shit, and sometimes I'll bring up some jokes. I also do stand-up comedy, mostly at the Hotel Cafe. You can catch me there most Wednesdays in Los Angeles. It's the Hotel Cafe. In fact, I do have a show coming up if you'd like to come. see me live, get some live stand-up comedy, me joking about the Matrix and all this crazy shit that we're seeing. I'll joke about all kinds of fun shit like Klaus Anal Schwab and the New World Leader, the intergalactic, the president of the Intergalactic Federation of the Illuminati. You will eat bugs and you will own nothing, and you will like it because you're a dirty, dirty bitch, you know? So, you know, I joke about that kind of shit. I joke about, you know, California and shit. I mean, it is a good place for cults, California, I gotta admit, you know? I mean, the weather's great. You know, people are beautiful here. I mean, you ever try to get a psychedelic orgy organized somewhere cold? Yeah, it just never works out, you know? So, you know, it'll be that kind of shit and some better shit. You know, I save the good shit for the live audiences. So you'll have to just come see me. I'm performing there at the Hotel Cafe, Los Angeles, California. The show starts at 9:30 p.m. Get your tickets at new.hotelcafe.com. And stay tuned for other live comedy events and other live events that I have planned coming up. That's the Comedy Madness show, by the way. I'm not the only comic that'll be performing. It'll be usually about 10 to 15 comics. A variety of people from TV, not on TV. Some are funny, some are not. Sometimes I'm funny, sometimes I'm not. You know, so that's the fun part of live comedy is you never know who's gonna kill and who's gonna bomb. So if you're into that kind of shit, then definitely come out because I need more people who come to my shit. So please. Also like and subscribe. Of course, this program is called The Program, so subscribe to our YouTube channel called The Program. I know it's hard to remember, but please subscribe to The Program, like and subscribe, share to your friends, and let's try to get this podcast off the ground. Like I said, please check out the Patreon, patreon.com/strangetv, and we will have a Patreon solely for The Program soon. Strange TV is my other YouTube channel. You can check it out. We have just over 1,100 subscribers right now. Very proud of that. Excuse me. So definitely check that shit out. Yeah, it's, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, anyways, check that shit out. It's a good time. Also check out my website, strangetelevision.com. And I think that's all my plugs, so I'll get back a little bit into talking about the weird shit. I'll leave you guys with this, okay? They're obviously censoring everybody. They're obviously brainwashing us. I just came out of public education not too many years ago, and I can tell you right now, as a creative, as a lover of true wisdom, school is not your friend. The media is not your friend. Entertainment's not your friend. If you want to make a move in this life that fulfills you spiritually and mentally, I think you have to adopt the entrepreneurial spirit. I think you have to create your own show, you know, decentralize yourself as much as possible, break outside of the matrix, do what you can to be self-sufficient, you know, set up as much as it's possible. I know it's not easy, but try to get that passive income going, you know, do all that kind of shit. I'm not a financial advice person, I'm not a legal advice person, all the asterisks, all the, you know, fine print shit. But, you know, these are just things that from what I can see, you know, getting out of the cities, getting land somewhere, that's definitely my next move. You know, if you can do it, definitely try to do it. You know what I mean? Because we're living in crazy times. And I don't know about you, but after the shit that we just went through, I don't want to be in a scenario where I'm stuck living in the cities. I'll tell you that right now. I am currently in Los Angeles, California, just until my career gets a little bit more momentum. I'm going to continue doing live comedy, continue doing podcasts like this, hopefully have comedians on, fellow musicians, friends and video editors and whatnot, but I also hopefully have some people on who have had some weird experiences or do some of their own research or just have another insight for you that you know, it's hard to find in the mainstream, because I really want this to be an entertaining show, but also, you know, try to bring it, you know, bring the IQ of not just myself, but, you know, everybody up a little bit more. I think we need more entertainment that is not afraid to look into things and ask questions and try to get to the bottom of stuff. So if that's what you like, if that's what you're into, if that's what gets your nipples hard, definitely like and subscribe. Once again, we're The Program and Strange TV. This has been another episode. I think we're right at about 30 minutes or so, so I'm going to cut it off here. But stay tuned for more magic and for more fun and entertaining discussions. I'm your host, as always, the Matterhead himself, Jacob Hayes. This has been The Program.